Episode 66 of Politically Conscious returns today, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Did Trump lead the U.S. into conflict with Iran, or was it by design? America chose him again, but would Kamala Harris have changed anything, or just the optics? Plus a raw recap of our Atlanta two-day live experience of Politically Conscious. No spins, just outcomes. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, everybody? This is episode 66 of Politically Conscious. What's up, Emil? How you doing today? Glad to have you on here. I'm looking to get our brother Leo from the right of things on here pretty soon, but you are coming from the left of things. If you are a first-time watcher of Politically Conscious, we try to raise your consciousness or awareness about politics and how it affects us personally and collectively, if you will. And we talk about clips from around the internet, as well as from mainstream media, and give you our perspective from the left and right. Our brother Emil represents the right, and we're bringing on our brother Leo right now. But Emil, if you will, give a quick intro, and we're going to get started with our clips today and talk about our live event that we just recently had here in Atlanta as well. But go ahead, brother.
Just as well as
you're on mute. You're on mute. You're good now.
All right. Emil Bryant, political consultant, author, and speaker. My job is to, when I consult with candidates, is to get them to tell the truth, tell it early, tell it often. Bad news does not get better with time, and people need the truth to make the best decisions they can. We are in an environment where the truth is fungible. It's time for politicians to stop trying to spin everything and give people the straight dope so they can make a good decision and do the right thing.
Yeah, Leo, you're on mute, just so you know, but I introduced you as well. I don't think Emil gets hired a lot trying to get politicians to tell the truth, but that's just my 3 cents. But if you will, introduce yourself, and we'll get started with our clips today. Thank you for being on, brother.
No worries, guys. Good morning to you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're coming in clear. So yeah, if
you got me, okay, great. Thank you. Well, good morning, and it was great having Emil in Georgia last week. Leo Smith, former Republican National Committee strategist, former Georgia GOP political director, and currently principal at Engage Futures Group and LLC, and also the C3 Engage Futures, where primarily I do government relations, lobbying, policy making, and influencing in the political world. And it's always good to chop it up with these brothers because they always have calls to actions associated with all the word sharing. So looking forward to following up on what we accomplished last week.
No, absolutely. But before we get into last week, let's start with the hot button issue that is currently happening in politics. And so I want to start here because I saw this clip, and I think it gave a lot of context. We know we're in this Iran conflict. A few weeks ago, if you missed it, Emil gave an amazing breakdown on what exactly is happening out in Iran, but there's a lot of mixed messaging out there. And I saw this one veteran just give this perspective. And Emil, you're a 20-year retired veteran. I served 6 years in the Air Force myself. And so I just saw this as a unique perspective, and I thought it would give our watchers good context for what's about to happen. And so I definitely wanted to get y'all thoughts on it, but we'll start with you, Emil, as a response to this guy. His name is Danny Farrar, if I'm saying his name correctly, a veteran, and I thought it was just a worthy way to start.
You notice how a lot of the guys that served in Iraq and Afghanistan are not supporting this war? And that the vast majority of those that are supporting this war are your right-wing military influencers. Plain and simple truth is you're not going to find somebody much more patriotic than me. I do not regret my time in the service. I do not regret deploying. I do not regret going to war. I moved forward with the information that I had at the time. And I fought for what I believed in. I believe in this country. I believe in the values that it has. But one of the things that you learn as an old man or an old soldier is you learn, it becomes crystal clear that war has nothing to do, by far and large, with the average citizen. I don't care what country you're in. War are fought to line rich man's pockets. That's a fact. There's no other way around it. The people that are in power, that make money and profit or stand to make money and profit, are the ones who instigate war. They're the ones who start it. The good guys or the bad guys. So if you look around and you pay attention, the vast majority of people that actually deployed, that aren't getting paid to say, let's go fight, the vast majority of them want no part of this shit. And what you're starting to see is this reality come to fruition. This will not be quick. This is not going to be quick. The best we have here is a long region war. That's the best outcome that we have sitting in front of us. The worst outcome is this manifest and spirals out of control into something much, much bigger. But you can bet and rest assured, this will not be quick. This will not be easy. And this suffering at the pump for just a short term is all.
So, Emil, I wanted to start with you because I think it's just great context, because I think as Americans, because we've had, if you will, all various presidents start skirmishes. A lot of them end up being short, couple days, or even a few weeks, if you will. And I think as Americans, I think it is typical, tell me if you agree with this, for us to kind of assume or hope that, one, it will be short. And then because of where we sit geographically, to a degree, we don't concern ourselves. We really only concern ourselves with the pump, as the guy said at the end, right? The price of the pump. That becomes our biggest concern versus the actual countries where bombing and people are dying and happening. Typically, we never have to worry about that. So as Americans, we just kind of hope it's quick, whether we agree or disagree with the president or not, whether we think it's started for a legit reason or not. But ultimately, I thought the context that he highlighted was this one may not be quick. And with your astute knowledge of what you've been seeing, do you agree? Do you disagree? Is he on point? What do you agree? What do you think, Brother Emil?
So, first of all, I agree with him that war in the post-Vietnam era, and you can even make an argument for Korea and Vietnam being wars of choice that affected the bottom line of people who had billions of dollars at stake, more than it was for the existential safety of the United States of America. And why that's important is because the motivation to go to war affects who goes to war. So if you go back to World War II, the motivation to go to war was there was an existential threat to the United States between Japan and Germany. The entire nation was galvanized based on that existential threat. They decided that it was the best way to fight the war was to draft millions of Americans into the war and fight it. So you had an entire nation who was galvanized around the thought that America was in peril, and therefore everyone needed to participate. As you move forward from there, you get to Korea and Vietnam, you still have the draft, but it's less so an existential threat. It's now something more ideological, right? It's communist. It's not the threat to America's safety. It's the threat to the American quote unquote way of life. And then when you get past Vietnam, you now start to see wars of choice that look more and more like war for the interest of war for American interests. What are those American interests? We like to say it's democracy. We like to say it's freedom. We like to say it's opportunity. But in actuality, it looks like, and as you look back in history over the last 40 plus years of engagements, it looks more and more like American interests aligned with big corporations and their profits. And so what people are seeing today in Iran is a continuation of that American interest thread versus the existential America threat to America thread. So that thread pulls into 2026 when people are saying, wait a second, did you exhaust diplomacy with Iran? Did you level best, do everything you could to avoid going to war? And when people see that that was not the case, then they question the motivation for starting the war in the first place, because diplomacy was not exhausted. So when we see that kind of thread, that it goes from an existential threat to a war for ideology to America's interests, and then you see that America's interests seem to align with large corporations, you begin to ask the question, and this old soldier asked the right question. You're not seeing America in peril. You're not seeing America's ideology being threatened. You're seeing America's interests being threatened. And that, to me, is why a lot of young men and women are challenging whether this war was necessary or want to participate.
So I'll basically say to you, Leo, you are someone who looks at markets. You're always talking about the market and things of this nature. Is it possible that even the American interest from a corporation and financial standpoint, because it's easy to kind of just highlight, oh, we're going to war for this. And again, I as a former, 6-year veteran myself, I absolutely can say personally, I love what that guy had to say from an old soldier standpoint. It's always the case, whether it's an existential threat, as Emil talked about, or maybe seeming an interest threat. Is it possible for those things to be aligned? Because I think it could be possible in this situation, but it's not going to be popular to talk about. And since we're straight no chaser, I was curious, are you seeing some alignment with American market with actual potentially existential threat, even though we like to divide those two in the propaganda of the media? If that makes sense, if my question makes sense. Go ahead, Leo.
Well, let me do two things real quick. One, thanks to anybody who has served. But one of the things that kind of strikes me, before I even get to the market question, one of the things that strikes me as interesting in the response that people not enlisted are having is the fact that people not anymore enlisted or serving, whether officer or enlisted men, the people not enlisted are responding. But isn't there a reason why people enlisted are not or currently serving, currently active duty? Emil, I've never been in the military. Closest I got was Boy Scouts and Sea Cadets. But it seems to me that those people who are currently active duty are not responding because they can't. Am I right?
That's correct. We have no voice in the political arena in that way. We can vote, and then that's about it.
Right. So when you sign up to join the military, you waive your right to have an opinion about the directives. Am I right?
In public, absolutely. In private, we're all very, very opinionated about the world events.
Right. Sure. Because you're not going to sit there and be yes men when you think that lives are going to be lost from your brothers and sisters serving with you, or the military strategy itself could be in jeopardy. The reason I bring that up is because I almost think although my heart and my moral conscience says listening to these people who used to be active, they really don't have any impact on this. And what they're suggesting, so let's say that we agree with that gentleman's comments, okay? That there's all these no longer serving people, including Emil, who think this is a horrible strategy. Well, the fact is that those very same people, when they are in the military, they would not be saying anything publicly. And so I don't know how much weight what he says will have, because there's just as many men who, when Donald Trump stands up on the stage at any base, anywhere in the world, they're going to be rooting, they're going to be tooting, they're going to be hollering, they're going to go, USA, USA. You've seen it, I've seen it, and you're going to see it again. Because they have to. That's that. Secondly, on the markets, do we have an interest in being imperial? Yes, because capitalism requires imperialism for stability. How do we know this? Well, if this had no market viability, then why are our gas rates up? Because of the Strait of Hormuz. Meaning, Iran is a threat if they're willing to impact the market. Now, you can argue that we threw the first stone, right, to create this disruption. But there is no doubt that the world market's dependence on bad actors, whether it's Russia or Iran, creates some real threats. Then there's the other positioning piece that I would have to wonder whether or not it makes sense. When I buy a house somewhere as an investment, I often consider the houses on the right, the left, the front, and the back, because I want sort of some territorial protection of the main investment that I make. Israel, Venezuela, Cuba, Greenland. So one can make a very strong argument that this is just strategic imperialism for protection of domestic tranquility. You can make that argument, and I don't think it's unviable.
I hear you. There's two things that you said that I want to quickly respond to. One, the first is that this president, among most, has tried much harder to make the military more political, and those rallies are part of that. And so that has put many military members in a very jeopardizing position. So I acknowledge what you said there. The second thing that you said that I think needs a little bit of clarity is when we talk about the mission or the goal of these actions, like the Strait of Hormuz and all this sort of stuff, you have to remember that America at one time was a trading partner with the Soviet Union. During the height of the Cold War, we traded wheat with the Soviet Union, and that was something that we did. We had scientific endeavors with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So it's not inconceivable that people that you are looking at as an opponent, adversary, or enemy still can work together. And that's the case. That's how it was before this February 28th war with Iran. Iran, even though it was a bad actor, played the game with the international community. Then they said, no, if you're going to shoot at us like that, because remember, they didn't close the Strait of Hormuz even after the attacks in 2025. So this was clearly a difference. And I just want to make sure we're very clear on that, because these bad actors and other bad actors have played with us, and we've played with them with success over many, many decades.
Yeah,
I don't disagree.
And again, I'm going to, and I would encourage everybody to go back and look at Emil breakdown while we're in Iran, and you'll hear about, again, we were actually very friendly with Iran for a lot of years when you get into the actual history and why it went, and we played a role in why it changed, if you will. Again, I'm not talking about right or wrong. We're here to give it to y'all straight, no chaser. So great comments from both of you. Here's a clip I'm going to play from Dr. Boyce Watkins, y'all, someone that's been supportive of mental dialogue, and he happened to have some comments about Iran, and I thought it was interesting because I think it can kind of let us dig a little deep. I want to go as deep as we went on your show you did for us, Emil, but I just want to give context as we keep walking through how did we get here, as I labeled today's show, Trump and Iran. How have we gotten ourselves here? And so this is a pretty interesting clip, and I want to get y'all thoughts. I'll start with you, Leo.
Trump is screwed when it comes to this war. It's going to be a lot longer than you expect, and it could destroy the global economy. I talked about this earlier, but I'm going to break it down again because I just came to another conclusion. My name's Dr. Boyce Watkins. I'm a finance professor. Give me 2 minutes, and I'll break it down for you and tell you what I predict is going to happen in these markets as it pertains to this war. So right now, really the biggest talking point of this war is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a part of Iran's effort to declare global economic warfare against the United States and all of the Arab countries that are supporting the U.S. Right now, the Iranians control the Strait of Hormuz. So Trump, with his big ego, thinks he's going to just go in there with the American military might and reclaim control of the strait. He's going to have a really hard time doing that for a couple of reasons. One, his allies can't stand him. They don't trust him. They're not really even equipped to get this job done. Number two, here's the question I want to ask you. Look, if we can't even secure our own damn border, what makes us think we can secure the Strait of Hormuz? Do you understand? It is much harder to secure the Strait of Hormuz than it took to secure our border. And you see people just coming across the border like it ain't nothing. Right. So to secure the strait, it's going to take thousands of troops. It's going to take all continuous 24-hour air support. The Iranians can just get on a little boat and launch missiles and run up on speedboats and plant mines overnight. You bring an aircraft carrier in, the next thing you know, they hit the aircraft carrier. You got $1 billion fireball. So basically, I don't think they can do it. I really don't. And this is going to disrupt the entire global economic infrastructure. This could devalue the dollar long term because they're pushing people to trade oil in something other than petrodollars, which was one of the things that was strengthening the U.S. dollar. So this is where Trump really messed up. This is that part of Menace to Society where he says, you know you done messed up, don't you? He's stuck. He's probably going to do something stupid because he's been doing stupid things already as it pertains to this war. The Israelis are controlling him apparently because only stupid influence would lead you to do such a stupid thing. And right now, I don't see a way out for them. They are really stuck between a rock and a hard place. And what's going to also happen is that there are going to be a lot of people that are going to get killed because they're going to start bringing. Trump is screwed when it comes to this war. It's going to be a lot longer.
So again, just a clip from someone that's been a supporter of doctor in finance, an economist, and so something he said at the end. And Leo, again, I'll let you respond first. Again, with the propaganda that you see in the media, there's this concept that Israel is controlling our interest there. And I know with the show with the Mill, we highlighted America really has its own interests aside of Israel. And I'm not, it's just the big picture. We're trying to give it to people straight, no chaser. And so as Emil highlighted on that show, he was like, cool, we don't mind looking like that because of our own real interests. So that was just something that, from his perspective, Israel's controlling us. I don't think that's the case at all. And there's a couple other things he highlighted as well. But Brother Leo, I'll let you jump in. Your thoughts on, again, his perspective and what's real and what's not from your perspective. You're on mute again. Sorry. Just let you know you're on mute again. Take yourself off mute.
Let me just say that first of all, I don't agree with, is it Dr. Boyce or Mr. Boyce? Watkins.
Dr. Boyce.
I don't agree that we didn't secure our borders. We clearly have secured our borders. So it's like, I don't know what political world he's paying attention to, but it is irrefutable, even by the most progressive leftists, that our border is pretty much shut down now. So to say that we couldn't secure our border, I don't even know what he's smoking. Okay. I think that's ridiculous. All right. Secondly, I used the example earlier. If I buy a property in the middle and I put one in the back, the front, the side, the right and the left, and then the one in the back says, hey, Leo, there's a property behind me that keeps trying to walk through our yards because I got a renter and I got a renter. Israel is a renter. So I got a renter and the one behind me, and that renter says, I don't like them walking through our yard or my yard. And I said, well, it's your yard because I rented you. Yeah, but that means they could also get to me. So now our interests are aligned. I'm not working on behalf of that renter. I'm working on behalf of my own interests. The renter is just somebody I use. America uses Israel. Now, you can think Israel uses us. They're not that strong and powerful to use America. We use them. And Trump is using them also for financial gain.
If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Emil, your thoughts on what Leo or Dr. Boyce had to say before we go to another
place? Dr. Boyce, his prediction is hard to invalidate, but I will say it this way. You have a dogged enemy who's prepared for a long-term conflict that is learning lessons from everything that they've seen over the last 47 years. Why is that important? This is one of the things that I think most people miss when they do their analysis. There are people who defeated the United States without defeating our military. Ho Chi Minh defeated the United States because he had one goal, and that was to stay. Vietnam became communist Vietnam when the United States left that conflict in 1975. Iran is using that and other things they've learned since then to say, I don't have to defeat the United States militarily in order to win this conflict. And what does a win look like? And this is where Dr. Boyce is very much spot on. They're attacking the vulnerable parts of America's most sensitive targets. And that is its dollar, its ability to make and use money. And what's more valuable than the full faith and credit of the United States? That full faith and credit argument is being challenged every single day because the president and others are tapping into that full faith and credit without good faith. And when I say that, I mean that not say as a critique of the president, but basically our allies cannot determine the next step. So you can't have full faith and credit without people believing in you, and people believe in you when they see a linear left to right from past to future. So they go, okay, what happened yesterday, I can count on that happening tomorrow. This president doesn't do that. He's very unpredictable, and our allies see that, and they're making decisions based on that unpredictability, which challenges the full faith and credit of the United States.
Yeah, and if I understand what you're talking about there, I think that's even aligned with, like, I got this one. I was going to read this comment from this one general, but I'm going to keep us moving. But the general just highlighted which I think that unpredictability that you just talked about really is, whereas Trump came into this particular administration, or even the last administration, in a sense, trying to be, in a sense, this strong man for America. And I've even applauded coming into the administration that Trump might be good for international relations per se. I know, Emil, you've been kind of beating up he's using one tool the whole way. I don't know how continuing to use the hammer in the way that he's using it, I was going to be effective over the long term. You've conceded there were times where it worked to an effect, but to your point, him using that same methodology now makes our NATO friends not really, in a sense, want to work with us. And this one general pointed out, he feels like Trump's perspective makes it so that he doesn't understand NATO and how that NATO should come forward as a coalition. But this seems like he's, for example, went into Iran as in a sense, one country actor, and then tells the friends to come along. And that general said, that's not how NATO works. He doesn't have that diplomatic perspective on NATO. So that was just something that I saw the general say. I'll let either one of y'all make a comment on that just to see what y'all think about that. Again, I just read that, and I'm not, so whatever thoughts either one of you have on that.
So people like to say that Trump doesn't understand stuff, that kind of thing. I mean, there's a general reaction to Trump that he is not very smart. You can be smart and evil. Let me just say that. and so I'm not making an accusation, but I'm saying you can be smart, super intelligent, and also evil. You can be morally dystopian. You can be disconnected from moral analysis. Trump looks at everything as a business negotiation. I can win this with a hammer, kind of. That's his way of operating. I think he totally understands NATO. I think he just doesn't agree with them on the strategy. Okay. It doesn't behoove him to be a consensus-oriented leader in a global way. Got to remember, he has a position that NATO holds back America from being the great imperialist that it can. NATO requires too much from us, and we get too little in return when it comes to what? Fighting any kind of disruption across the globe. Never forget Trump's premises, his theses. His thesis is America has been a sucker. He said that even before he ran.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so let's understand that and not call it a lack of understanding.
Okay.
He has come in saying, I'm going to be a freaking bully. I'm going to do big stick politics. He's swinging the stick.
Hey, Emil, quick thought. I'm going to go
to Now, here's what I disagree with morally. Even if I believed in the strategy and what might even, in some cases, be good for America long term, I don't believe that you should indiscriminately swing your stick around and hit anybody and everybody and just whack-a-mole people, including little children and women who don't have anything to do with military action or governmental strength.
Nah, good stuff. Matter of fact, before you go, Emil, I'm gonna have you answer this question real quick, and then we're gonna go to a clip to keep us moving. My brother D'Amico's been watching for a minute. He says, we don't need a history lesson. Why are Black Republicans supporting Trump on this illegal war? It's unconstitutional. Hey, that's great. These are all fair thoughts by the people. So yeah, what's your answer? I guess I should. Well, we get Emil real quick, and then Leo. I guess it's fair because you're the Black Republican on the show.
No, Emil, I don't even have to answer that.
I want to hear Emil's thought. Give me like a line and a half, Emil, so I can go back to Leo.
For sure.
Really for him.
Oh, on this question?
Yeah, just a little. I want to just hear your quick thought before we go to, because I got to get it right. I got to send this back to Leo because
Republicans are incredibly disciplined when it comes to following their leader. Period. Dot.
Okay, got it. All right, what you think? Let's answer this question.
No, I'm explaining the leadership strategy. I'm sorry if I hurt somebody's feelings because my strategic explanation doesn't align with what they feel, FEEL, they feel should be happening. No, I respect those comments. And, there's no court in the world that's defined this war, excursion, deployment. It's a war. No one said it is. No one has proven that is illegal or unconstitutional. So
it
let's
is
just
unconstitutional because if you declare war, which we have not, which means that he can go around it, but he's not. He's using the War Powers Act. He's using the authorization for the use of military force, which was authorized in 2003, and he's not sought Congress to do anything that is required under the Constitution to engage forces the way he has. So there is a very strong argument to say that it is unconstitutional because the power that Congress has, they delegated to the president for a very specific purpose. He's outside of that purpose. He's outside of the law.
How do we prove that, Emil? What's the venue for proving whether something's unconstitutional?
When you have a Congress that is doing its job properly, which I told you just a moment ago, the Republicans are following very much lockstep in line with the president. They would say to the president, we will withhold funds until you come to us and ask us for the money and authorization to go to war. Barring that, he had that's the reason for the War Powers Act. Sometimes the president needs to act faster than Congress can deliberate. That's what that War Powers Act is for, but it has been abused in this case. And if you had a Congress that was functioning properly, that's where it would be tried.
Now, let me ask a quick question from, again, me as the moderator and layman here. What's this $200 billion I keep hearing about that everybody throws out, if you will, that, in a sense was asked for this? How does that fall in the dialogue you both are having right now? That $200 billion of funds needed to.
Well, let me jump in, and I'll let Emil put the fine point on it. But that's exactly right. That's where I was about to go, Montoya. So the very fact that Trump is already pre-messaging that I'm going to ask for $200 billion to continue our effort, right? All right, the war effort. All right, that's going to make Congress have to answer whether or not it's true that this is unconstitutional. But yet we don't have the answer. And that's my point. When Emil talks about the War Powers Act, what he's saying is it's actually constitutional what we're doing.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Again, I would argue it's not. But to go to the $200 billion, the war effort is outside the boundaries of the normal operations of the Department of Defense. I don't use the Department of War because that's not its official name changed by Congress. The Department of Defense has a budget that allows it to do certain things every day. When you enter into a conflict, that changes the spending. And that spending change has to be approved by Congress so that you can do the things that you're doing outside of the normal operation of the Department of Defense. The part that is really important here is that we spent roughly $1 billion a day so far on all of the things that have gone on in Iran. So the $200 billion is to replenish what we've already used and to go forward, looks like indefinitely, in order to continue down this path that we've taken. And this is the hard part for Congress, because Congress is now between a rock and a hard place, which President Trump is extremely good at. Do you stop funding something that's already ongoing, or do you fund it knowing that you probably didn't want to enter into it anyway? That rock and a hard place is now where Congress sits, and he's masterfully put them there by doing things that are outside the boundaries of what people would consider constitutional use of force.
And I would offer that.
What do you say? Hate the player, not the game. Go ahead.
Because I would offer that plenty of presidents have been unique and smart enough to do this on both sides of the table at different times. This is not me arguing for or against Trump. It's just very normal to watch the three branches play this game in this manner and move around the lines of what's legal and what's not legal. So it's not simply illegal if we're honest about it. But I do understand what Emil's saying, that if it were discussed by Congress and the way it's continued, it could come to the table. But I also understand what Emil's saying. I mean, what Leo is saying. He says at this point, that question kind of brings Congress to the table and they can decide whether they're going to fund or not. It is a rock and a hard place, but it doesn't make it simple as we as citizens might like to say it's illegal or it's not illegal. Neither one of us are exactly right without considering everything at play, in my opinion. But let's go to one more clip about this war, and then we're going to move into some aspect of, would this look the same had we had Kamala? I just want to have y'all speculate. We don't know, but I do want to have those thoughts after this last comment on Iran. I thought this is something that was near and dear to me, kind of going back to the situation of those who are in the military versus those of us who are no longer in. I think this is going to reignite some of that conversation. This is a very short clip.
We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country.
Those are the words of a potential war criminal right there. And that is not the advice and counsel and direction that any Secretary of Defense should be providing our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. It puts them actually in greater danger. The Secretary of Defense is a disgraced major that was kicked out of the DC National Guard. He has no qualifications whatsoever to be the Secretary of Defense other than his extreme loyalty to the president. Again, those are the words of a potential war criminal.
So, Emil, I'll let you start, and I'll lean into, I actually agree with the retired Major General. I would be, you retire, but in my 6 years, I would be so shocked to hear the Secretary of Defense or even the captain above me when I was a second lieutenant, you know what I mean? Or the colonel that was over my base having conversations like that. And I'm actually supposed to now salute and go forward. I don't know if I would be confident if I heard anybody in the military talk the way Pete Hegseth. And this is not simply about what he's saying, but it absolutely matters to the troops. And I agree with the Major General. Yes.
So we have a very clear line that we try not to cross. It's called the law of armed conflict. That comes out of some very bloody choices that we made as a nation. Going back to the most extreme example is the My Lai massacre in 1968 during the Vietnam War. And if you look that up, it's M-Y-L-A-I, My Lai massacre in 1968 is when our troops acted just like Pete Hegseth said they could. That was an awful human rights violation. It was a war crime. It was tried as a war crime. The lieutenant tried to get out from under it, saying he was ordered to do that. And that's what they said in Nuremberg. I was just following orders. Nuremberg from the trials after the World War II of the Germans and the Nazis. So when you hear someone saying that, no quarter, we're going to untie our hands of our war fighters, what he's really saying is, I'm giving the enemy carte blanche to do to us whatever we do to them. And I just do not agree. I'm with the Major General here. I just do not agree that that is a wise warfighting strategy. It's harder to fight the war with the rules we put on ourselves, but those rules serve us very well.
And he says, untied from the rules of engagement. Like, how do you put those words together? I'm only 6 years in, never deployed during war. So I was fortunate not to even have to experience that. But again, I couldn't imagine following the lead of someone who would put those, we're going to untie your hands, when the whole thing you're learning when you're in the military is understanding the rules of engagement and when to understand a lawful order versus an unlawful order. That's a big portion of our military training, especially as officers. It's often we're going to be the ones giving the orders per se. So again, I am blown away and agree with the retired Major General in that we have this unqualified guy as the Secretary of Defense, and it's playing out in the worst way. This is not about whether I agree with us being an Iran or not. I just don't know why he is leading us. Go ahead, Leo, your thoughts, and we'll go to another clip.
Look, both you guys have served. Are y'all predicting that we're going to end up with a huge number of conscientious objectors sort of quitting the military and saying, I can't follow these orders? Is that what y'all are predicting?
I'm telling you that there will be challenging moments on the battlefield for especially Marines and soldiers who are in the zone and have to make some very difficult decisions. And they will say, I was following orders. Will there be a flood of conscientious objectors? Yes. Will there be thousands of them? No, but it'll be a lot more than you have seen, because a lot of young people in Gen Z who enlisted and are serving are not ready to do something like this. But you will not see that as much as you will learn after the fact that these words from the Secretary of Defense put our soldiers and Marines specifically in jeopardy. And that conflict you will not see as much, but we'll hear about it in our circles after the fact.
Let me ask you this, Emil.
I don't know if it means.
Leo, let me ask you a quick question, Leo. Yeah, quick question, Emil. I think that right now we have enough of a history with the understanding of lawful order ever since the Mali, because that's when everything changed, right? That's the point of line of demarcation that they really explained to us about exactly what happened with the Mali massacre, if you will. And so that's the point that we've learned for it. So I would offer that right now we have enough leadership prior in the military to where Pete Hegseth himself saying those words, well, I don't think it will lead to a bunch of conscientious objectors, because I think we have enough history right now. I just don't like that the head of the Secretary of Defense is starting to use that language, and I am fearful of where the next 2 years could go, or next 3 years could go, while that's the person that's heading it up. But I do think we have enough moral and historical teaching to not have a bunch of conscientious objectors, because I don't think they're going to just start following unlawful orders just because he said it. So I would challenge you on that.
I agree with that. I'll agree with that for sure.
All right, go ahead, Leo.
No, you guys are in a better seat having served and knowing what the rules for following your leadership are, to make an assessment on that. And that's why I asked you the question. You know, I'm kind of emotionally unattached to Pete Hegseth's rhetoric. Just like Donald Trump, he is a former entertainer. And so therefore, I don't care who the entertainer is, y'all always know that I, like Malcolm X, says we should not follow the political lead of entertainers. So Donald Trump is an entertainer, rhetoric is an entertainer. Now, elections have consequences. We elected an entertainer with a particular world viewpoint, right, and personal viewpoint, who then appointed people who will entertain with them on the basis of their entertainment value. So let's stop acting like we're new babies on milk when we knew that this is the way this thing works with this particular administration. Not saying that it's not worthy of comment. I'm just saying, okay, Pete Hegseth is a crazy man. Who didn't know that?
Hey, this next clip
the
is
military
so perfect.
is not. I don't believe. Okay, get the net. Let me finish. The military, y'all know better, and y'all didn't say anything that I didn't suspect. That's why I asked the question. The guys and the men and women in the military are going to follow orders. That's what they're going to do. They're going to execute.
Yes, and most of us are going to interpret those orders when they're questionable as to not cause ourselves to be court-martialed sometime after the fact.
Absolutely. And I depend on that as well. But this clip right here is so on time to what Leo just said. You couldn't have planned it better. You couldn't have paid for this clip to fit next. Because now I want to go into President Trump himself. How do we see it? And just have both of y'all do a speculation after you hear this clip, and then we'll move into what we did here in Atlanta live. But I do want to speculate how things might look different had we had a different president. But I thought this clip was perfect to set that up, and it comes right off of what Leo
Donald Trump is an idiot. What is your response to that?
If you're kicking my ass, I'm going to find a way to make you smart.
Break that down.
Yeah. If you kick my butt, I'm figuring out a way that you are stronger, faster, better. Because one, that is a horrible reflection on me. Now, that we could say me, the person, but also me, the system. You mean to tell me that this system was so fragile and so poorly designed and has all this time just been floating on vibes that someone that you think is just a useful idiot could break it? Fine, he's an idiot. But then what does that make us?
Classic, right? Because what do we say on this show all the time? What we say on this show all the time, we are trying to, one, raise awareness on how much your vote matters, and from a collective perspective, what can we do to move our people, right? And so we always highlight, we don't waste time on Trump syndrome. I think it's whatever it's called, TDS, whatever they call it. We don't waste time on that, because at the end of the day, whether you like it or not whether you personally voted for him or not, but we selected this man as president. And there's some ownership that if we as a country, whether you voted for him or not, don't own that, then that actually is how it can keep happening. Like as Tressie McCottom said, we just moving on vibes. Yeah, you moving on vibes if you can just get caught up on it's him and not understand the role that each of us have to select someone that we quote unquote think is proper. So Lee, I'm gonna let you kind of respond first, and then I'll let Emil respond, because again, this leads us into how would things look different in y'all opinion if Kamala Harris had won the presidency. I think things would look different. I will go on record and say that. However, first I want to talk about us as a republic owning what we see happening, and we like to kind of leave it at the president's feet, and that's not fair no matter who the president is. Go ahead, Leo.
I've mentored, led, and coached several top CEOs of very, very top Fortune 500 companies. I've mentored, led, and coached players who went on to D1 schools and became NBA players, NFL players, MLB players, even in my own family, okay? One thing you do not do is call your guy who just whipped your butt. They are stupid. Losers say stuff like that. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to call everybody a loser, but half the country are losers if they think Donald Trump is such an idiot and he kicked their butt, and so therefore no. They did some things that won the game. And the way that you create champions and winners in life is that you teach a humble confidence, humility to know that you could have done some things differently to have won that game. And yes, America, look at yourself. America, look at your preparation. America, look at your bonbon eating. America, look at your social media vibing. America, look at my president is black and my Lamborghini is blue, and all your parties and your Prosecco sipping and your Sunday brunches. And you think, all things are good because around in my circle, we all think like this. Get out of your bubble and become a performer, America. We were not performing. We were not strong, and we are not strong. And you got to have that humility to beat the next Donald Trump.
Emil, your thoughts?
We didn't elect an idiot as much as we elected a demagogue, and we were ripe for demagoguery from both internal and external sources. I'll focus on the internal. America never got over its race problem, no matter what we say we did, and that is important because somebody like a demagogue can come in and touch those buttons in the right order, and all of those things come flooding back, and people will swear up and down, this is not about race, this is not about gender. And yet we see over and over again the clear messaging that comes out, not just dog whistles, but actual whistles. It's right in front of us. And for us as a nation to not acknowledge that this demagogue was able to do what he did because those festering wounds have not been closed, healed, and properly sutured, that is where our vulnerability lies. It has been here for 150 years since the end of the Civil War, and our enemies know it. If you go back and look at the propaganda, there are propaganda museums. You can look at the propaganda from the Japanese, the propaganda from the Vietnamese, from the Koreans, from the Soviet Union, from the Chinese. from the in all of our conflicts. That propaganda maintains that wound is still there. And until somebody, us, decide to close that wound and really address it like grown-ups, we will be subject to another demagogue, maybe one from the other side. But that's the problem. We're not insulated because we're not thinking. And to Leo's point, we're acting like everything's okay because I'm okay. That's not true. It never has.
So, and you know what? And Emil, I don't know if you'd agree, but we don't really need our opinion on what Vice President Harris would do if she had won president. Donald Trump gave his own opinion to what Vice President Harris would do if she had won. Donald Trump said she's going to get us into a war with Iran, and I won't. And I agree with him. I do believe that she would have got us into the same war.
Okay, fair enough.
I do not, but I have my reasons for that. But it doesn't really matter because the speculation is overcome by events. The point that I would say is until you have people who are fundamentally looking for reasons not to go to war, you will always find America choosing people who choose the hammer first or the hammer far too soon. And to Leo's defense on this one, I would say that President Harris, if she were elected, in order to look strong, if she were put into a corner, would probably reach for that hammer just as quickly as Donald Trump. The circumstances around it might be different, but the fact is she probably would have reached for that hammer quickly if she were put in that corner.
Especially since she's
I would say maybe not as quickly, Emil, but a lot more diplomacy because that's what they kind of lean into. But at the end of the day, is Leo right? Will we have ended up here? More than likely, even though most people may assume not. But the reality is, as we mentioned, here's the reality. Again, if you take Trump out of this equation, which we keep recommending to a degree for everybody listening. Yes, he is our president. But as we've already highlighted, if you are listening for the real and not the propaganda, this is our own interest, not Israel pushing us. And since this is our own interest, whoever is the president would actually try to ensure our own interests. Brother Leo has highlighted capitalism has its imperialistic interest. Here's another perspective, whether you like it or not, and we've talked about it on a previous show. There is a real push by China to eventually become at least equal to us as a superpower of the world. And so there is a deep, long-term effort in our interest to ensure that does not happen. So that is a bigger part of the reason we are in Iran, more so than Israel, as Leo has correctly highlighted. They follow us, not the other way around. We're there because of the long play of China trying to become more powerful. And right now, they're reliant on that 20% of oil. That 20% of oil that Iran controls, 90% of it goes to China. Okay, so I'm just giving y'all some actual information different than what you're hearing in the news. And so because that's the case, China, just to give y'all some more history, they are quickly focused on alternative fuels as to not be dependent on that oil coming from Iran. That's why they're one of the world leaders in it. They don't want this to be one of their weak spots. Our country is striking while they are as dependent, because if they become less dependent, this move will not be effective in the future. So it's partly why you're seeing it done now. That's my perspective from listening to both of you and the research I've done. Emil, I got to give it to you because you understand this geopolitics way better than I do. But I got a decent assessment of what I think is happening versus what the news is telling the people every day.
You're right, Montoya. Here's something that I think people can chew on as well that will sort of give them a lot more context. When you see these big moves happening across the world and you're trying to figure out what's going on, they always say follow the dollar. And I'm going to ask you to follow whose dollar, right? Not just follow the dollar, but follow whose dollar. It might be in America's best interest because in 1974, Nixon, or 73, Nixon went to China and saw them as a potential economic ally versus the Soviet Union. China saw that relationship being to its advantage And that's why China's accelerated through so many generations of technology and economic growth in the last 50 years. That was a big deal. So when we say we want China not to, we initiated China's rise to the power that it's become.
Yeah, we did.
And if we're scared of that, then perhaps another strategy might be at play, which is perhaps it's best to have a multipolar or bipolar world where China is fully invested in the world's current order. If that's true, then we might not necessarily need to antagonize them in order to defeat them.
So I don't think I'll mess with that last part, Leo. I mean, not Leo, but Emil, because their clear-cut rhetoric is not to be what you just suggested. So they, again, we are too financially connected not to do business with each other, no matter what each country says about one another. So I do want to make sure I'm, giving credence to that. But I don't think you should ever disregard rhetoric. And the rhetoric is that they would antagonize us just as quickly as we antagonize them. So while both countries are slinging mud, I don't know if I trust your solution. I'm just keeping it a bean. So I do understand the big picture of why we're making this move now. Again, I'm not saying people out there have to agree with me, but I am giving you more game than what they're telling you in the media. I do know I'm doing that.
100%.
All right. So we got Kennedy said, that doesn't make sense, Leo, that you think she would have gotten us into this war. And the reason that we're in this war is because of lies and warmongers. And so, Kennedy, I'll just keep telling you, brother, this ain't got much to do with who's the president, as much as this is a long-term interest of the United States to ensure China doesn't become as strong as they're trying to become. That's the bigger picture. That's the bigger picture. Absolutely, Leo. Absolutely. There it is.
You're not going to hold back 1.3 billion people who have determined they want to be a competitor on the world stage. So what do? You make them a best friend if you can't make them a worst enemy.
Hey, good perspective.
But that's a worthy attempt. And then pillow talk is also power. So if you're married to a guy who's culturally and ethnically concerned about Israel, as Kamala Harris is, by the way, Kenny, she's married to a Jew, okay, who loves Israel. So that's also part of the influence that she was going to be under. Okay, not only her job to protect America's interests, but she's going to be getting pillow talk every night.
I didn't even think about that. All right, let's close this out with talking about what happened in Atlanta. I do still about 10 minutes, so that gives a whole 15 minutes to talk about what we did here in Atlanta. Got to highlight that. I'm going to play just a real short clip just showing what we did. For those who don't know, we basically, as the young people say, we actually went outside with the politically conscious, right? We were outside, right? And so we've been on YouTube for a year. And Emil, who's up in DC, Leo got him down here. And so we actually did a 2-day event, a Thursday night event. And then y'all also came to my Mental Dialogue live experience, which I do every third Friday. And so for 2 days, we talk politics with the people, if you will. And so here's a small promo video of a recap of what we did, just to show it off, and then we'll get into the dialogue. And I actually want to critique what we did. I have a pretty harsh assessment of how I did as a moderator. I consider myself a great moderator, but we'll get into that after this little clip right here. So let me just again show this for the people real quick, and then we'll have a 15-minute dialogue.
Leading before the synagogue, I got to talk to a former co-worker of mine who's from synagogue. He was going to give me an inside scoop. Here's the thing, the real benefit of it.
We must pay homage. You are going to win because you know the rules everybody else doesn't know, unless you are.
You've heard the statement, the system was never designed to work. How many of you heard it, lady? So just a quick little video highlighting some of the highlights from the week, from the Thursday and Friday. Again, Emil, thank you, Leo, for all your help on putting it on. The first night, we had the goal of a Black agenda, right? And my concept was to bring conservatives and liberals together, obviously with all their different thoughts and different beliefs on policies, and to see if there was some type of common ground that would, in a sense, represent African Americans, whether we can find 1-2 points or whatever the case may be, some points that we could now, as a collective, as still, even though we're the third largest demographic in the country behind whites and Hispanics now, we are still the second largest voting blocks based on our voter registration, if you will. And so as the second largest voting block, I said, hey, can we come up with something or at least something in the agenda that we could present to politicians, whether they were on the left or right, that would be consistent with the things that will help us as the second largest voting bloc collectively. That was the goal. That was the goal the first night. Now, what I found out, Emil, is conservatives don't want to come to a gunfight. Leo was in there by himself. So we were not able.
I don't know. There are a couple of people who were at least independent. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, we had some independents, but my goal was to get more from both sides. So you end up having to represent the right by yourself. So we did a lot of promotions, and I said, hey, Leo, get some of your friends in there. You got a couple of your independent friends, but we weren't able to get none of your right side friends. And our brother Shelley was supposed to help me get some people from, because again, I wanted to be a dialogue versus it just being leaning one way or the other. So I'm just kind of
the challenge to that, and so Montoya, I think the challenge, and this is where I think you did a great job of, because one of the things that you did is actually you polled the room, and I think there were actually more people who claim independent from parties than there were people who were party fans, right? So that's consistent with the national mood, right? The independent voter is the fastest growing voter prototype. Okay. So in other words, we should not expect, the other thing that we should not expect to have happen, and I guess the reason why you asked me to do this is because why would a traditional Republican voter come to a 98% Black Democrat neighborhood? That's not his peer group. Now, the only reason a Republican strategist would do that, or even a Republican candidate would do that, is because they cared so much about those people, and they saw affinity towards those people from an ethnic or a historical reason, as I do. And I have a moral consciousness that tells me that I should be concerned about people even if it doesn't benefit me. But that's not politics. See, that's values. And one of the bright, brilliant people at that meeting, and this group was just really intelligent, by the way, but one of the brilliant people at that meeting kept talking about values. So if we get to the underlying thing, and that's what they got to, and that is one of the things about the souls of Black people, right, is that morality, consciousness, and values still matter to us. Whereas some people have cultures that abstract values and morality away from winning and power. Mm-hmm. And so this is why it's important that when we do have a connection like we have with you, me, and Emil, and you being the bridge maker as an independent thinker, independent voter, and independent, and even your strategy of how you do this work. Mm-hmm. We should not expect a Black activist to go to Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, and lead. And we should not expect a Black Republican conservative or any Republican, period, to come to a 99% Black Democrat voting district. Why should they? Now, my interest is as not only an American, I'm an American nationalist. And so I want America to be strong. And I don't think that America can be strong if agendas that increase interest and engagement, participation, etc., if they aren't not only created, but if they're not leveraged so that they deliver and manifest in people's lives so they can believe in a moral capitalism, that I think that the moral fabric that of Black people in America is real historically, and I think it needs to be redeveloped presently. So that's what I think, the power of what you did, and the fact that we came up with some agenda items, I'm sure we'll get to them, just inspired me. And I'm glad you did it. And I'm so happy that we even had Ruth Walker, had tip to Ruth Walker, and the reception that she curated from the beverages that were unique.
Excellent.
That,
Excellent.
So
that was the best part.
The food was amazing.
That was the best part.
Thank you, Ruth Walker.
Yeah, best part. So Thank you for that, Leo. Again, and so the actual agenda items were socioeconomics and education. As a moderator, I failed to give fair time to the education, so we really didn't get into that. Matter of fact, Kenny, who's watching, who's beating you up, Leo, he made a great point on education, and I said, I wish you would have brought that point forward sooner because it would have prompted me to get into another subject matter quicker. From my perspective, Emil, I want to hear your thoughts. I thought the socioeconomic conversation still tended to be too broad to be effective, and maybe from the viewpoint that I'm thinking of what we were, I was kind of looking forward to something that we could present to candidates, no matter whether they were Republican or Democrat, and specifically Black candidates, just in the sense of here's an underlying agenda that, when it comes down to those individual votes, make sure we at least getting this out of it. Because I understand that politics is a leverage game, and sometimes, well, not sometimes, the reason we do this show is because the propaganda will force you to be on your team and only on your team. That is not how politics effectively work. At the end of the day, your candidate that you put in office will have to give something to get something. That's the name of the game. As Leo said, it's a leverage game. So I'd hope maybe to have something more directive come out of it. And since it didn't, I kind of said, hey, didn't really accomplish that goal. But what's your thoughts on how the first night went? And then we'll get into the second night.
Stimulating conversation prompted by something Leo said, and that is politics is a competition for resources. That conversation already opens the door to broadening our minds, and that's what happened. And yeah, it was hard to hone in on a specific socioeconomic topic that we could push to a candidate and say, hey, we can get you votes if you support this policy, which would have been the follow-on conversation if we were able to do another very targeted conversation just about socioeconomics and or education. The other thing that we did that I think was great, though, was that there were a lot of people whose eyes were open as to what each other is doing. In that room, there were people who were working at the grassroots level and at the business economics policy level and at the governmental policy level. And that cross-pollination was important. We had someone who is running for office in the room who was listening very intently and had some ideas as to how to go forward better in his candidacy. I think that was a very huge win for us to have someone who's running for statewide office actually listen to and be inspired by the conversation. And the last thing I'll say about it was that although we didn't come up with a specific, we were able to have a conversation about some stuff that each of us needed to hear that allowed us to understand what the other person is working on and thinking about as they work on it. So although it wasn't a clear-cut topic, it was a conversation that I believe will lead to some very significant and robust change over the next several months, if not over the next year or so.
Thank you for that.
Because the foundational premises were established, Montoya. So what happened there was first we had to deal with the overall cultural differences, and we talked about that. So there was a big discussion about the cultural value of Black American experience, even from a diaspora perspective. That was discussed, and then it was discussed specifically to America, and that's where the values, the idea. Now they came up with a paradigm that it was so wonderfully and clearly presented that it drives good policy from there. And here it was. One culture focuses on a financed existence in the world, a financed I thou, a financed sort of reason to be, right? A financed. The other culture focuses on an investment paradigm.
Right.
Where my reason to be is to make other things around me better, to not only improve my economy, but raise my own economy by creating more wealth and ability and capacity around me. Okay? Financed propositions, finance ways of leading, finance ways of determining policy, financed elections versus invested elections, investing in people, investing in processes, investing in places like Pittsburgh, the community. Okay? That is a cultural wealth that we bring, meaning the Black American experience is lost. It's lost But that's one. So now that we set the stage with that paradigm, we can get to wage growth. We can get into, earned income tax and how do we invest in family growth and family strength, right? How do we get into, scheduling and
right.
workplaces and paid leave in workplaces. You know what? You know who believed in family development, paid leave, and things like that? Ivanka Trump. The daughter was pushing that with Jared Kushner. She was telling Trump in his first administration, we need to do more things to strengthen families at the bottom level. So these things are very, very viable. And I think because we dealt with that premise of what's our advantage and paradigm, now, Montoya,
we can galvanize around
3,
it.
4, 5 is going to really drill down.
No. Well, no, I appreciate that, man. And a great perspective, because again, I was like, man, I don't know if I handled it that well, and not to take too much of y'all time in our extra innings. The second night, just for people out there watching, we talked about, does your black vote matter? And I thought that was a more particular and more robust conversation from the standpoint of staying on point. That's all I mean by that. Both nights were a great conversation. So I'm not saying that the other conversation was, and I love what you guys pulled out of it, because I didn't see it that way. So I definitely appreciate what y'all pulled out.
You were the moderator. You weren't supposed to. You were doing your job.
I could
see. That's what a good moderator does.
Yeah.
Right.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
You were neutral on that. It was good.
Nah, good stuff. So yeah, 2 nights of it. Thank y'all for coming to town. Maybe we can pull that off yearly. Maybe maybe next year we'll see where we're at with the actual show, and continue to further those conversations, keep making the relationships. And again,
I'm already committed.
Hey, Montoya, can I do this?
Yeah, please.
So that's it. There you go. So I love it, because he just did what I was going to do. I'm already committed to it too. And I made a promise that by June 1st, there will be a website up that chronicles these meetings, that collects and aggregates what we learn from these meetings, these what I call them sort of like focus groups, that collects that information from these communities, and that looks for opportunities to leverage what we learn. And I've already got the domain ready, because I promised that group that I would set up this website, and that it would be called something like Leverage Voter, or it would be called Leverage Sit Out, meaning we're not going to tell people that we're no longer being engaged, but we're going to say, we're not going to compromise on some agenda items, and we're going to use some leverage as we determine whether or not we will vote for you.
Hey, that's why this is called Politically Conscious. Thank y'all for an amazing time. I'm going to end with this from this clip from Joshua Das. If y'all want to stay on in comments, you can. If you got to go, that's fine. It's just, again, something to keep us thinking as voters. We are politically conscious. I'm a big fan of Joshua Das, who is a analyst. I'm sorry, I'm getting his title wrong, but he has a great page called Das Discourse. We use a lot of his clips, so I want to give him his credit. But it's just something to make us think as voters, whether you agree or disagree with him or not. If both of y'all choose to stay, I'll let y'all give one comment afterwards. If y'all got to go, I understand.
I was thinking a lot about the 2 pilots that died and the 41 others that were hospitalized in that plane crash in New York at LaGuardia. As it's been reported, airports across the country are understaffed and are in a frenzy because the government is shut down. And it made me think a lot about when Charlie Kirk very publicly expressed how he would feel very unsafe if a black woman was his pilot, and how, suggesting others should feel unsafe under those conditions as well. And it made me think about this. They will always try to take your attention away from the things that actually make you unsafe. But the truth is, and the data bear this out, the safest you'll ever be in America is when everybody around you has what they need. What can they get you to look at? What can they get you to fear? If I say it enough times, can I convince you that the dangers of a black pilot outweigh the dangers of a disorderly government? Can they talk about ballistic missiles enough to make you trade the $50 billion that was for your healthcare subsidies for $200 billion of bombs? Every single county that expanded Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act saw a reduction in violent crime. SNAP benefits, food stamps. When areas get more of those, there's a correlative relationship with a decrease in intimate partner violence, with arrest rates, with violent crime rates. What can we get you to fear? The wars for your safety. The wars for your safety Statistically speaking, the safest you'll ever be in America is when everybody around you has health care. Statistically speaking, the safest you'll ever be in America is when everybody around you has food and SNAP benefits. Last year, they passed a bill that cut your health care and cut SNAP benefits and gave $75 billion to ICE so that they can police you while you starve. Watch out for those Mexicans. They got what you're supposed to have. Watch out for them trans people. They're dangerous. Who can they get you to fear to keep you from fearing them? Corner stores, airports, polling places. Who will survive in America?
That's how propaganda works. That's why I really played that. It's not even whether his about the political leanings. It's just being aware of how the propaganda works. And they'll get you to fear something and you miss the actual thing. So we're here. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Leo, since you stayed, I'll let you give a thought on that. And Emil, I'll let you close us out.
No, the brother knows of what he speaks. That's political strategy in modern times.
Well, good stuff. Emil, close us out, brother. Thank you.
The well-being of the voter is the voter's responsibility. If we don't see to it ourselves, we should not expect the people we elect to do it for us. The whole point of us having power is to use it to our benefit. The moment we surrender that benefit to someone else, we put our own safety, health, and well-being in jeopardy.
All right, y'all. See y'all next week. Great show, y'all.